Hello, my name is Riley Fisher, and this is my informative speech. Raising a child is no walk in the park, as there is many room for error. But when error becomes mundane in a child's life, their mental state may suffer. As a child, our parental figures in our lives are responsible to give us all the necessary conditions needed for a child to thrive. When a parental figure neglects children of proper care or they are exposed to adverse events, it may event in years of trauma and even cause the child's relationships with family, friends, or significant others to suffer. After countless hours of research on the topic of childhood trauma, I found out just how badly these events can harm a child's future relationships with others. Childhood trauma originates from a negative environment, causes adverse behavior in children, and impacts relationships with others. First, we are going to look at how childhood trauma originates from a negative environment. A negative environment can result from a lack of parental advisory, too much parental advisory, physical, sexual, or verbal abuse from anyone in their environment, abandonment or neglect or disorganized attachment, domestic violence, changing caregivers, such as if a child is going to be given away to its grandparents for whatever reason, exposure to substance abuse, and an absent parent, as the SOS Children's Village says. These traumas can be caused in childhood within the household environment and the environment created by caregivers. This can also include elementary school or middle school environments. Environmental traumas can occur within the household and outside of the household within the child's life. Trauma of this form can be prolonged or brief, but is nonetheless scarring for children. Events that can occur within childhood causing trauma, such as loss of a loved one, serious accidents, natural disasters, school shooting, bullying, or major life changes such as human trafficking or war terror. SOSUSA.org says that children may exhibit signs of traumatic stress if they endure events such as these. Childhood trauma originates from causes of adverse behavior. Throughout different stages of adolescence, the behaviors caused by trauma change the way that a child thinks and acts. The older an adolescent is when the traumatic event occurs, has more positive outcomes when it comes to healing. Preschool age behavior, they may show signs of crying more than normal, shy or timid, new fears or nightmares, bedwetting, poor eating habits, baby talk, questions of dying, stunted developmental growth. And when they reach an elementary age, the signs of childhood trauma show as shame, guilt, anxiety, clinging to adults, trouble sleeping, difficulty concentrating, startled, afraid of event or anything that may trigger emotions related to event, overly talkative about the traumatic event, upsetted by minor injuries, decline in school performance. This has been seen with multiple elementary school kids. Middle school and high school, they may have emotions of feeling crazy, depressed, avoiding places where trauma occurred, trouble sleeping, reckless behavior, promiscuous behavior, self-harming, eating disorders, drug abuse, and numbness. These behaviors have even been reconciled on an adolescent's quality of life. Childhood trauma is a risk factor for psychosis. Antiamphetamine increases symptomatic striatal dopamine levels and can induce positive psychotic symptoms in healthy individuals and patients with schizophrenia, Tariq Dahan says. So there are solutions to the adverse behaviors that are seen within childhood trauma. In addition to these behaviors, heightened emotions and fears and anxiety lead to a risk of schizophrenia and psychosis in adolescents. These adverse effects of childhood trauma don't only affect the child's behavior and mindset, but it can also affect the way that the adolescent views relationships with other people and the environment around them. Childhood trauma and relationships with others greatly impact each other. The way that childhood trauma affects the human brain rewires the victim to change the way that they think. Attachment styles to other people change in relation to what traumatic events the victim has endured and experienced. Because of this, romantic, platonic, and family relationships suffer. Different attachment styles include avoidant dismissive, avoidant fearful, and avoidant anxious. These all attachment styles are all affected by trauma. There's also a healthy attachment style, but that can be seen later on down the road once the adolescent has solved their traumatic issues. Traumatic events can even affect the victim's communication style, which further affects their relationships with others. Lori Lawrence says that communication styles are something that we learn and develop over time. In the same way, you can unlearn and learn how to communicate in different ways. These communication styles include passive, passive-aggressive, and aggressive. For example, if someone grew up in a household where yelling was a relevant way of communication, these behaviors are enacted within relationships throughout their lives. In conclusion, after hearing about the facts of childhood trauma, hopefully you found some of this information useful. Although the effects of trauma are devastating, all of the effects that we discussed today are fixable. As we start to understand trauma and mental health more, there are more solutions. Childhood trauma originates from negative environment, causes an adverse behavior in children, and impacts relationships with others. So next time you or a loved one is struggling with relationships or mental health, try looking into the past to better understand the future. Thank you so much, guys, and we will be playing a short video after just for some further understanding for you guys. Thank you.
Is much more than a story about biology. From the earliest years, relationships with others play a key role in shaping how our brain grows and develops. Early relationships, where there is abuse and neglect, have a long-term impact on children. A brain that has adapted to survive in a threatening or unpredictable world may not work so well in an ordinary environment. This can create what is called latent vulnerability, where early abusive or neglectful experiences with carers put children at greater risk of experiencing mental health problems in the future. For these children, compared to their peers, common experiences like moving to a new school can feel more daunting and stressful. New faces can appear threatening, while positive social cues can be missed. It can be harder to negotiate new social situations and learn to trust new people. Even fun experiences like joining a new sports team can be challenging. Too much focus on potential threat cues can mean missing out on positive social cues such as a playful nudge. Or it causes an overreaction, which leads to an increased risk of conflict and sometimes violence. These reactions can increase the likelihood of generating new stressful events. It's harder to deal with everyday challenges when you feel unconfident and anxious inside, and harder to build and maintain relationships. Over time, this can mean a child loses friends and the support of adults, and so misses out on opportunities to grow and develop. This social thinning can increase the risk of mental health problems in the future. Neuroscience research is beginning to shed new light on how vulnerability unfolds over a child's life. All children need care and stimulation from adults who value them and who show them attention and love. These experiences shape a child's brain development.